15 years of marriage, and on the eve of our anniversary, my husband sat me down and said, I want a divorce, and I'm keeping the house. He thought he had won, but he had no idea what was coming. Right before our 15th wedding anniversary, my husband Mark sat me down at our dining table, his parents beside him. His mother smirked, his father looked bored, as if this was just another business meeting. Mark folded his hands, leaned in slightly, and said in a calm, almost casual voice, I want a divorce, and I'm keeping the house since you can't afford it. His mother's smirk widened. His father gave a small, approving nod. It was clear this had been discussed, planned, without me. My stomach twisted, but I kept my expression blank. I had been expecting this for months. The late nights at work, the whispered phone calls, the sudden coldness from his already distant family, and then there was the money. Mark came from old money. I did not. His family had never let me forget it. A small-town girl who worked 2 jobs to put herself through college, I was beneath them, lucky to have been chosen. I never let their words get to me. I built a life with Mark, or so I thought. But over the past year, the bank statements stopped making sense. The savings we had built over 15 years, over $320,000, was dwindling. Yet I wasn't the one spending it. When I asked Mark, he brushed me off, patted my hand like I was a child. I handle the finances. Don't worry about it, he'd say. But I did worry. So I started digging, and what I found made my blood run cold. Now, as Mark sat across from me, looking smug as his mother nodded like they'd won some silent war, I calmly reached for my coffee, took a slow sip, then pulled a thick manila folder from my bag. I slid it across the table. Then you'll love what my lawyer sent me this morning, I said. His smirk faltered. He frowned, flipping the folder open. As his eye scanned the first page, his face drained of color. His mother leaned over, reading with him, her expression twisting in shock. This can't be happening, she screeched. I tilted my head, a small smile playing at my lips. Oh, but it is. And I let them read. The court wouldn't be granting him anything, not the house, not the accounts, not even the failed business venture he had started using stolen money. And the best part? His parents, who had smirked at me across that dining table, were realizing in real time that their financial ruin was tied to his. They had co-signed his bad investments, helped him hide assets, encouraged him to believe he could discard me like an old sweater and walk away unscathed. His mother clutched her pearls. His father, usually so composed, rubbed a hand over his face, the weight of it all crashing down on them. Mark slammed the folder shut, jaw clenched. This isn't over, he hissed. I took another sip of coffee, standing up. Oh, honey, I said, voice soft, steady. It was over the second you underestimated me. And then I walked out. For now, because soon that house would be mine. Mark wasn't done, not by a long shot. In the days following our disastrous meeting, his texts started. At first, they were measured. Let's be reasonable. We don't have to go to court. You're making a mistake. Then they turned angry. You have no right to do this to me. This is my house. You won't win. But I didn't respond. I let my lawyer do the talking. And that's when Mark made his next big mistake. It was just past 2 a.m. when my phone buzzed. A neighbor. Hey, Sarah, she said, hesitant. I don't want to alarm you, but Mark's at the house. He's throwing stuff onto the lawn. I sat up. What do you mean, throwing stuff? I mean, your furniture, your books, your things. A pause. His parents are there, too. I was already getting dressed. Did you call the cops? I wasn't sure if I should. I'll be right there. When I pulled up, I could hardly believe my eyes. The front yard was a disaster. My couch, my chairs, even the framed photos from our wedding scattered across the lawn like trash. Mark stood on the porch, his face red with fury while his mother barked orders beside him, waving her arms like a mad woman. She doesn't live here anymore, she screeched. Get rid of it all. His father stood to the side, silent, arms crossed. I stepped out of my car, raising my phone so Mark could see the screen. What the hell do you think you're doing? Mark turned, his face twisting. You left? He spat. You abandoned it. This is my house now. I let out a slow breath. You really don't understand the law, do you? He sneered. What's that supposed to mean? I took another step forward, tilting my phone just enough. The cops are already on their way. Right on cue. Flashing red and blue lights flooded the street. Mark's mother's face twisted in horror. "You called them?" I smiled. "No, the neighbor did." Mark tried to argue, but it didn't matter. He had just committed illegal eviction and destruction of property, and now he was in trouble. But Mark wasn't done losing yet. Not even close. A few days later, my lawyer called. "He's fighting back," she said, almost amused. "He's trying to drag this out in court." I sighed. "Of course he is." "And," she added, "he's claiming that you were the one hiding money." I actually laughed. "That's rich." "It won't hold up," she assured me. "We have all the records. But be prepared. He's desperate, and desperate men do stupid things." The very next day, my phone buzzed with a notification from my bank. Someone had tried to access my personal account. I didn't even have to guess who. I didn't waste time. I called my lawyer. "We need to freeze everything," I said. "All accounts, all assets. I don't want him touching a dime." She agreed. Within hours, Mark was locked out of every financial account that still had my name attached to it. Then, just for good measure, I sent him a single text. "Nice try. Hope you enjoy explaining fraud to the judge." His response came within seconds. "You're ruining my life." I stared at the message, a slow, satisfied smile spreading across my lips. "No, Mark, you did that all on your own." But just when I thought I had backed him into a corner, he did something I never expected. He moved his mistress into the house. Not just any mistress. Danielle, a woman I knew, someone from his work events, always a little too friendly, always laughing a little too hard at his jokes. I had suspected, I just hadn't cared enough to confirm. A neighbor sent me a photo of them unloading suitcases, walking into my house like they had just won a prize. I stared at the picture, hands shaking with rage. I wasn't heartbroken. That stage had passed. I was furious. Mark had drained our finances, lied, cheated, stolen, and now he had the audacity to move another woman in before we were even legally divorced. I forwarded the picture to my lawyer. "We need to move faster." She sighed. "He's digging his own grave. Just let him keep making mistakes." But I wasn't feeling patient anymore, so I made a move of my own. Mark thought he had won. Thought he could parade Danielle around my house, spending what little money he had left, pretending he was still in control. He didn't know I was waiting, watching, and holding on to a secret that would end him. See, Mark wasn't just bad with money, he was criminally bad. A few years ago, he took out a massive loan in his parents' name. He forged their signatures, used their credit, and then gambled away most of it. His parents never knew because he had been making the payments. Until now. Now he was broke. Now the payments had stopped. And now I had the proof. I made one phone call, one anonymous tip, and just like that, the bank flagged the loan for fraud. Within a week, his parents received a notice. Then a lawsuit. They were being investigated. Unless they could prove they hadn't taken out the loan themselves, they were on the hook for $350,000. It didn't take long for them to connect the dots. And when they did, all hell broke loose. I was sitting in a cafe when the first message came through. Mark's mother. "You did this. I hope you're happy." I smirked and took a sip of my coffee before replying. "No, Mark did this. You just covered for him too long." That same night, Mark called. I let it ring, then a text. "We need to talk, please." I ignored it. An hour later, another one. "Danielle left." I read it twice. Then another one. "My parents aren't speaking to me." And the final one. "Are you happy now?" I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen, and for the first time in a long, long time, I felt free. Mark's desperate texts kept coming, but I didn't reply, not at first. Then, a few days later, an unknown number called. I wouldn't have answered, but something told me to pick up. It was his father. "You need to come to the house," he said. His voice sounded strained. I hesitated. Why would I do that? A long pause. Then, in a tone I had never heard from him before, he said, "Please." I didn't know what I expected when I pulled up to the house, but it wasn't this. The once pristine lawn was overgrown, the front door hung open. Inside, a disaster. Furniture overturned, holes in the walls, empty liquor bottles littering the floor, and in the middle of it all, Mark. He sat slumped on the couch, a half-empty bottle of whiskey on the table, his face pale, his eyes hollow. His mother stood near the doorway, stiff, arms crossed. His father sat across from him, looking worn down. Defeated, I took a slow breath, Why am I here? Mark lifted his head, met my eyes, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I didn't see arrogance or anger. I saw fear. I lost everything, he whispered. I didn't respond. He let out a bitter laugh. Danielle took what little money I had left. My parents are being sued. The house, it's not mine anymore, is it? I just stared at him. His mother scoffed, turning to me. This is your fault. I raised a brow. My fault? You could have walked away. You could have left this alone. But no, you had to destroy everything. I let out a low laugh. I destroyed everything. Or did your son do that when he drained our accounts? When he committed fraud? When he moved his mistress into my house? She opened her mouth, but Mark suddenly spoke. She's right, Mom. His mother's head snapped toward him. Excuse me? Mark swallowed hard. She's right, I did this. His father sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. Maybe it's time you stop blaming her and start accepting the consequences. Mark flinched, but he didn't argue. And for the first time, I saw it. It was finally over. This story isn't just about revenge. It's about justice, resilience, and taking back control. Sarah was underestimated, dismissed, and betrayed. But instead of reacting with emotion, she played the long game. She gathered evidence, stayed patient, and let her enemies destroy themselves. The biggest lesson? Never let anyone make you feel powerless. Knowledge is power. Financial independence is freedom. And people who think they can manipulate and discard others will eventually face the consequences of their own actions. To those who have ever been lied to, taken advantage of, or treated as disposable, remember, strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet, calculated moves that bring the loudest downfall. If you found this story compelling, subscribe for more powerful tales of justice, survival, and triumph. You won't want to miss what's coming next.